Hello, welcome to this quick introduction to the Being Agile method and mindset. This session is meant to give you a bit of a taste of Agile, so introduce a little bit about being Agile before our live session, so give you a chance to actually think about what it means to be Agile in terms of our mindset and our behaviours and our attitudes, and also an opportunity to try out one of the Agile tools, so a bit of doing Agile as well. So this will give you a little bit of a taste for the session going forward. So let's have a look at Agile mindset. So our Agile mindset, why we need to have an Agile mindset, bit of a reality check in the sense of what we plan versus what happens. So more often than not, what we plan out and what actually happens can be very different, and we need an approach that allows us to respond to change over following our initial plan. So we need to be able to change and adapt things to respond to the situation as it emerges, as it evolves. So there's a great way of kind of thinking about the types of approaches that we can take. So on this matrix, a nice little simple matrix, we've got that close to agreement or far from agreement on what we're doing. And then we've got that close to certainty and far from certainty on how we're going to do things. So when we're down there in the bottom left-hand corner, we're very close to agreement. We know what we're doing and we know how we're going to do things. We can take a predictive approach. We can take a predictive approach where we plan things up front, we then do that work, and then we evaluate it at the end. And we can do that when we know what's going on, things are quite certain and predictable, obvious. You know, we can put in place best practice, things like that. But as we move away from knowing what we're doing and how we're going to do things, things do become more complicated, they become more complex, and ultimately they become more chaotic. So if we have no idea what we're doing or how we're going to do things, then we're plunged into chaos. And this is where Agile really comes into play. So Agile is much more of an adaptive approach rather than a predictive approach. And that means that when we're not entirely clear what we're doing or how we're going to do things, so when things are evolving, they're changing, there are unknowns. So we literally don't know what we don't know yet. Things are uncertain and unpredictable. And that means that we need to take a more emergent approach to what we're doing. So we need to be able to respond to those changes and change our priorities, change our approaches based on what we learn as we go through our project. So Agile is really, really great for helping us when we're up there and we're not entirely clear what we're doing, how we're going to do things. So things are complicated, they are complex, and they are chaotic at times. So it's really helping us to manage and deal with those things. So when we are up there in complex and chaotic environments, and there's lots of change and uncertainty going on, then that brings about with it a lot of challenges. So it means that we face a lot of challenges around how we take our work forward, how we come up with working solutions. And here's a big long list of things that people often talk about when we talk about what the challenge is when we're up there operating in complex environments. So that's slowing down a decision making. It's difficult to estimate things because we don't know exactly what we're going to do. We haven't done it before. Things are changing. We're starting things, we're not getting things finished, we're trying to big upfront plan things when we really don't know what we're going to be able to do. So making those big upfront plans can be really hard. Feeling overwhelmed, feeling overloaded, balancing that day-to-day work with our change and improvement, our growth projects. And then that leaves very little time for reflection and follow-up. It means that our communication, our collaboration can break down, and there's a lack of transparency, lack of trust, and it can be really hard to work as a team. And certainly, you know, remote working is a good example as well of where, you know, we're working in those complex environments, and we need solutions that help us to work effectively when there's lots of change and uncertainty going on. And certainly that's where Agile comes into play. So we can think about Agile as being Agile, as this mindset and culture, our way of working, our way of approaching things, our attitude that things are going to change. And then we have a great toolkit of doing Agile, which actually helps us to live these attitudes, these behaviours. So this is a really nice quick little exercise, one to get you thinking before our session, and just thinking about around raising our awareness about our Agile mindset and our Agile thinking. What, do we have an Agile mindset? Are we behaving in an Agile way? So as I read through these things on the list, just have a think about whether they resonate with you, whether you recognise them, whether that's in yourself or in others, current situations, past situations, things that you can see might happen in the future. So do you delay delivery until completely ready? So you won't let things be released until they're absolutely done, and you really like them to be perfect as well, or you work with somebody who's a real perfectionist. Do you find yourself haggling over precise wordings and insisting on written orders? Prioritizing those unimportant tasks. So when there's something shiny and new that you might want to do, you might prioritize those tasks. And insisting on doing everything through channels. So making sure that we're following due process and we're going through those correct channels and following our policies and our procedures. Referring matters for further study and research. So this might be where somebody has a great idea and general response to that is that go away, put together a full plan, evidence this, come up with that, and then we'll consider it further. Including as many people as possible in decision making. So this is where it's almost like that kind of collaborative decision making that we want to get, as broad a view as possible, and as many people involved in that decision making process as possible. And always applying all regulations to the last letter. So this is where, we tick every box. Even if we don't need to tick the box, we will still tick the box to make sure that we are, applying all those regulations, and we're absolutely covered there. So hopefully that got you thinking a little bit, and you might have recognised one or two. I always tend to confess to the prioritising unimportant tasks. It always is a distraction for me that I have to manage. And you may be thinking about where I found this list. So I'm going to reveal to you now where I found this list. And this is really the bit that hopefully gets you thinking about some of these attitudes and behaviours. So this list I actually found quite some time ago, and it's in a declassified simple sabotage field manual. So it's a manual that was put together back in the 40s, and the idea was that this is a guide of helping allies that are being forced to work for the enemy, and this manual is full of small tips and tricks and tactics for you to sabotage productivity in your workplace without getting caught. So just have a little pause, have a little think about these things that we were just talking through, what your initial reaction to these things were, in terms of how did you feel about these things? Did you feel that this was something that you definitely do and really must do? Or is it something, did you feel positive or negative about it? And then reflect on how that is actually impacting your ability to be agile. So sometimes it's not necessarily what we need to start doing to be more agile, but also what we need to stop doing as well. So a bit of food for thought there, and to give you a bit of a takeaway, so to help get you thinking a little bit more about, well, if we're not doing these things, what are we doing instead? Then the manifesto gives a really lovely summary of that, and we'll certainly dive into detail on this in our following sessions and in our live session. So the manifesto is great. It stood the test of time for about 20 years in the tech sector. This is a iteration, if you like, of the manifesto, so for the Being Agile method. So some slight tweaks of wording, but certainly the sentiment stays the same. So the idea of the manifesto is what we're saying is, while we value things on the right hand side, we value the things on the left more. So remembering that we're up there in complicated and complex, we're not down here in simple, we don't know exactly what we're doing and how we're going to do things, then we need to look at what we're valuing. So we want to value individuals and interactions. We want to, in fact, value those conversations. Conversations are key to effective communication over those fixed processes and tools that we might have in place, those channels and those procedures and policies that we have in place. So those are important, and we should certainly, keep sight of them, but we need to value those communications and conversations over those things. Working solutions over comprehensive documentation. So it's really important to have comprehensive documentation, and it's important to tick those boxes. But if the solution doesn't work, then ticking those boxes, providing that comprehensive documentation, has really limited value. So what we need to do is we need to value getting that working solution up there quickly so that we can learn, so that we can develop further, over trying to big upfront plan everything right at the start. Collaboration over contract negotiation. Again, contracts, really important. No one's saying we shouldn't have contracts, we definitely should. But if the relationship, if the rapport, if that collaboration with our customers, with our partners, with our teammates, with our stakeholders break down, then actually those contracts are really, really hard to sustain. So we need to value that collaboration over that contract negotiation. And finally, back to our initial slide, that responding to change over following a plan. So yes, we have a plan. It's a bit of a common myth of Agile, no plan, but yes, we do have a plan. But we recognize it's almost like our best educated guess of how this is going to pan out based on our skills and experience. But we do recognize that we don't know what we don't know, that we are not entirely clear on what we're doing or how we're going to do things. Therefore, we need to respond to change over following our plan. And Agile gives us our methodology for doing this. So that's that introduction to the Being Agile mindset. I hope that leaves you with something to think about. Gets you thinking about that Agile mindset and your Agile thinking, some of those behaviours and attitudes. Perhaps when you're in meetings coming up between now and our next session, you might notice these behaviours, and so raising your awareness is actually the first real key step in moving us towards being more agile, is actually becoming aware of our own behaviours, of our own attitudes, of our own values, and whether or not they're actually helping us to be more agile or whether actually they're sabotaging our agility. So if you found that useful, do let me know, and we'll pick up on that more, as they say, in the next session. We'll dive deeper into that Agile mindset, the values and beliefs that sit behind it. So now for the second part of the session, we want to really focus on that Being Agile method. So the mindset on one side and the method on the other, that Being Agile and now the Doing Agile. So doing Agile is really great for helping us to be more agile. So it's giving us those tools and those practices that allow us to actually act in an agile way. So again, we're looking at our processes, our practices, our methods, and our tools. So this is meant to be a bit of an overwhelming slide, and it's just there for impact, really, to say actually there is such a wealth of agile tools and practices and ideas, different styles and flavors of agile, different models out there that we can use. So it's really this kind of big umbrella term now for helping us to live that agile mindset, for helping us to respond to change over following a plan, for helping us to identify those unknowns and deal with those and still create great working solutions despite that change and uncertainty. So what we're going to do is we're going to really dive into the core that sits behind all of these tools and processes. And through our time together, we will pick and mix out some of these key ones that are shown in this diagram. I think it's one of the nicest representations I've found. It's a little bit older now, but it's a great representation in that kind of idea of a tube map of different methodologies coming together to form this kind of roadmap of tools and practices that we can use. There are certainly things that I would add to this map if I were to tweak it now. So it certainly should be this never done, constantly evolving resource of tools and materials that we can access to help us to be more agile. So when we were talking just a minute ago and we had that initial slide about what I plan, what happened, that kind of traditional predictive planning approach that we tend to take, we can see that on the left hand side here. So we'll tend to plan everything up front, then we'll do it, and then we'll evaluate it at the end. And that's great for when we know what we're doing, how we're going to do things. But one of the key challenges of that is if we're only evaluating at the end of the project, of the piece of work, of the product that we've built, then actually we can't feed that feedback back into the system. So it is very much feedback rather than feed in during the cycle. And all Agile does really simply is turn that into a loop. And so we do, rather than one big long marathon, we think of it as lots of little short sprints of work. So where we're learning and planning, we'll act and release our work in progress, we'll review and reflect on that, and then we'll learn from that, plan some more, and then release that work in progress, do some more work, and then review and reflect and learn. So we're going through this cycle a number of times during our project, during our product development, in our everyday workflow. Each time we're looking at that sprint of work. And generally a sprint is around 2 or 3 weeks long. So my sprints tend to be around 3 weeks, but it really does vary on the project and the team that you're working with. I've certainly found in different areas, different sprint lengths work well, but for certainly now, I would definitely kind of recommend just having a couple of weeks as your sprint, just where you get started and you work out what sprint works best for you. So we can think of it, if we were, say, running a project, is rather than think of that project of one big long marathon, is break it down into lots of little short sprints of work where we're learning, we're planning to do something, we're then doing a little bit, we're releasing that work in progress, and then we're reviewing and reflecting, learning from that, and then feeding that into our next sprint where we'll plan, we'll respond to change, we'll alter our plan, we'll do some more, we'll then reflect and learn. So this is giving this opportunity to be able to change our mind, to build in change, to build in knowledge and understanding that we've gained, to make improvements, to adapt and evolve. So we often talk about pivoting or persevering. So that sense of at the end of each sprint, we're kind of like, yes, we're on the right track, let's keep persevering, or no, hang on, there's some alarm bells here, let's look at how we might pivot. So it might be a very small pivot, or it might be quite a big pivot, depending on the feed in that we're getting throughout those sprints. So how we then kind of apply that through, the tool that I'm going to introduce you to now is the Being Agile Canvas. So you can use this. So the idea is between now and our next session is that you'll use this just to apply it, and you can apply it just to your day-to-day. So I often really encourage people just to, you know, get out what's in their head on their to-do list and use it for your day-to-day management initially at your own personal level. Or there might be a particular project that you're working on, a product that you're developing, a team that you're working with, a collaboration that you're doing with partners, that you have got particularly in mind that you'd like to apply this through. Certainly in our one-to-one sessions, we really get stuck in applying the Agile to your own particular context and working world. So this is that first step, give you a bit of a taste, and it also really helps get a picture on the wall, literally, of what's going on. So how your work is going at the moment, or indeed your life if you're applying it to life. So the Being Agile Canvas, it's a really nice, simple canvas that you can use. It's a bit of a starting point for you, so you can adapt and evolve this to your liking. So I'm going to run you through this, and then hopefully you can get the gist of that. You can download a copy, you can create a copy on your window or a whiteboard if you've got it, or you can use a digital tool like Trello. So right, let's give you this guide. So on the left-hand side of our canvas, we've got what we call our backlog, and this is all the work that we need to do. So it's our future work, so things that we know that we need to do. So these blue post-it notes are representing that future work that we know we need to do. And then we've also got an inbox for new inbound work, because of course we're always getting new things coming in that we need to capture and then respond to. So often most teams I work with are balancing a mix of planned, predicted work, and then that kind of unpredicted new inbound work that comes at you as well throughout your sprint. Then on the right hand side of the board, we've got our current sprint and our work in progress. So this is the batch of work that we've decided to work on in this sprint, and it's helping us to track the status of that. So you can see we've got a to do, a doing and a done column, so that shows what status that works at. We've also got a bit of slack here, so this is for those unplanned, uncertain things that are coming into our inbox, so giving ourselves a bit of room for those. We've got a waiting box. This is where if we've started something and it's got stuck, so we're waiting on something to come back, or we're unable to progress it for some reason, that we can put it into waiting, and that frees us up to work on something else. And then we've also got a feedback box there, and that's where you might have done a task, you've done an activity, you think it's done, but until somebody else, the customer or manager or whoever it might be, says yes, that's great, that's good, I accept that, and until it's been tested, we can't call it done. So that's just that box there for making sure that we're checking and getting that feedback, doing that review and that reflection, part of our process. And then when we do get to done, we do capture those done items. It's really important to capture our dones, because then at the end of our sprint we can celebrate and we can say, yeah, we got this stuff done, but at the same time we can also review and reflect, so we can look at those things and say, okay, what went well, what could have gone better, and how can we feed this back, what have we learned, and how can we feed that back into our next sprint. Okay, so let's just run through a little example, because I think often examples are much easier to understand than a kind of theoretical explanation. So imagine we're running a sprint. This is your board. These are all your to-dos. We've got our Agile training here, and we're going to run a sprint, and that sprint is this week. So we'll just take it as a week, and so we start our week and we pick from our backlog what are the things that we want to get done this week, what can we get done this week. So you can see there I've picked 4 things there. I haven't filled up the whole to do. We've still got a slack here for anything new coming in, but I filled up my to do column. So I start my sprint. So we start working on something, and of course what happens is a couple of things drop into your inbox. So we're going to have a look at those things in our inbox, and we're going to say, okay, are they important, are they urgent? If they are, then we'll put them into our Slack. So we've got that Slack in our current sprint, in our current week, that we can then respond to them. If they're not, then they'll go down into our future work for consideration for the next sprint. So in this instance, we've got one of each. We've got one that's come down. It is urgent, important. It's a must do. We must get this done. So that's gone into our current sprint, whereas the other one has popped back into our future work for future consideration. Right, let's continue with our sprint. So you can see that one's kind of turned into a bit of planned work now. So this is today. So we're doing our Agile training. We're currently doing our Agile training. We're also working on that ad hoc task on the side, of course. We've got one task completed. We've started something, it's got caught up in waiting, and we've still got one more task to do. So then let's go through. And so our next slide, we've got that Agile training done. We're waiting for feedback on that ad hoc task, and that waiting task has become unlocked. So we've started working on that, and then we've still got a task to do. And then hopefully we get to the end of our sprint and everything's done. So this, of course, doesn't always happen. What sometimes happens is we might get to the end of the week and perhaps this happens. So we didn't actually even get to start those 2 things. Perhaps that's because this thing that we thought was quite small and straightforward turned into something massive and took up most of our week. Or we might indeed end up with something like this. So we couldn't get these things done because they were stuck in waiting. They were blocked for some reason, which meant we couldn't get these things done in the sprint. So this gives us a really good picture of our current workflow. It gives us a picture of our mix of work, what we're spending our time on. So here we've got our kind of planned day-to-day activities. We've got some training, and we've also got our ad hoc work, so we can get an idea of that mix of work that we've got going on. So this is a really nice little example of a board that we made during lockdown. It's for homeschool. And so you can see we've used different colours to represent different topics and different subjects of work. We've got our backlog of work here. So we've got our maths in yellow, our English is in blue. We've got science in green. You can see that we've got our backlog of work, what we're working on today. So these are the things we had to do, stuff that we were actually actioning and doing at the time, stuff we were waiting on. So this was because we needed some materials to do a science experiment, and then something here that's ready to be checked, so that then we can upload it and call it done. So this worked really, really nicely in lockdown, just to help us to keep on top of that homeschooling, give us a nice, fun kind of visual way of tracking those things through, and also just so that we could, you know, pick what we wanted to do rather than follow a list as well. So I've got another talk on this if you want to hear more about this. I love our done jar as well, because by the end of lockdown we had a lovely big full jar of post-it notes, which just showed how much that he'd learned during lockdown. So it was great. So I really encourage you just to try this out, you know, get some post-it notes out. The other option is a Trello board. You can get free Trello board. So it's a free app that you can put on your phone, or you can put on your laptop, download through a browser, or use for a browser. And so if you prefer a digital approach, but I do love post-it notes. I do love the tactility of post-it note and getting that visualization. So if you've got some handy, do use those. And again, we'll review and reflect on this. So this is really just getting you started about what you're getting things out of your head, getting you started, starting to use that agile method and use that process just to keep track of what you're doing. So then we can pause and reflect and look at that in more depth. It's really helping to give that visibility, as I was saying, your work, that capacity, the balance, the slack. You know, are you planning too much? Are you not doing enough? Are things getting stuck? All these different things. What's that balance of getting the day job done? Are you getting those change and improvement projects done, or are they getting stuck? It really helps to give us visibility and answer lots of questions. So that gives you, I hope, a little exercise around being agile. So that mindset, so getting you thinking, that sabotaging agility exercise, getting you thinking about our own attitudes and behaviours and how we're currently being agile, and then also that introduction to the canvas, which really gives you an opportunity to do some agile, so get stuck in and actually practically apply some of this stuff so that you can then reflect and review at the end of your sprint. So I do really encourage, this is the first step, if you like, take an agile approach to adopting agile. So we don't see this as one big bang thing. It is actually lots of little steps of change and improvement, trying things out, trying out these tools, trying out these things, just going with them, seeing how they feel, see how they work for you, so that then we can look at how we can then take that further. So and I just, again, just to kind of point out as well that, you know, these things can feel a little uncomfortable initially because they're new routines, new behaviours. So you might feel a little bit, you know, perhaps not embarrassed, but, you know, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable. You're stepping out your comfort zone a little bit, trying these new things out, and that's okay. You know, I think, you know, you will go from that wave at the end of a Zoom call is that we all feel quite cool waving now, and it's part and parcel, it's normalized, and that's what we want to do with moving you towards being more agile. So if you I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the live session. If you don't have a live session booked, you can email me, have a look at the website, find out more, or you can dive into the hub as well to find out more about being agile. And of course, there's the book as well. So thank you for watching. I hope you found this session useful. If you have, give me a thumbs up, please, give me a like, and do subscribe so you can connect in for more stories. I'm sharing lots of different stories and exercises as well online, so keep in touch, and I'll see you in the next session. Thanks.